Hello, and welcome to the Race, Wealth, and Health Podcast, a podcast that serves to educate and empower while we explore the intersections of social justice, economic empowerment, and holistic well-being within communities of color. I am your host, Dr. Joycelyn Morris, and I invite you to join me as we dive deep into the crucial topics that shape our lives, challenge the status quo, and strive for a more equitable future for all. Hello. Welcome to another episode of a Race, Wealth, and Health podcast. I am super excited, as always, to have an amazing guest with me, Ms. Sabrina Lamb, who is the CEO of Wekeza, as well as World of Money. Sabrina Lamb is the founder and CEO of World of Money, which is a nonprofit, the leading provider specifically of online and in-person youth financial education in the United States and 4 African countries. Her efforts earned her the Best Overall Financial Literacy App Award from Motley Fool. Additionally, she's the CEO of Wekeza, a fintech focusing on family financial education and services for the African diaspora. Sabrina is also a WBLS FM open line online contributor and the author of 6 bestsellers, including the NAACP nominated Do I Look Like an ATM? And forthcoming children's book. She's also been honored by the NBC News, the Griot 100, State Farm, Essence Magazine, and the Rainbow Push/Wall Street Project. So without further ado, welcome, Sabrina. Yes. No, it's great. I typically do the introduction of how I met. And I think we actually met through a colleague, a gentleman who works with World of Money. And by works with, I think, volunteers with World of Money. And he was also a participant through the organization I work for called MLT. And we connected, of course, given my passion around financial education, financial literacy. Sabrina and I linked up to talk about ways in which I could get involved and help out with World of Money. And we've just stayed connected ever since. So I thought it was only appropriate to have her come on in the month of April, especially as we look at Financial Literacy Month. And this month, I thought you would be a great guest to have on the podcast, kind of talk about all the amazing things that you're doing in this space.
Yeah, an honor to be here. Thank you for your work, as well as you are a member of World of Money's National Advisory Council. Thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm honored to be. So while I hope I did you justice on your bio, I do want to also give you a bit of space if you want to tell our listeners a little bit about your journey and how you got to the place of founding both World of Money and Wekeza.
Sure. I'll start off going forward and then going back. I don't understand why the streets are not on fire with regard to economic justice, liberty, equity. I just don't understand why people are not upset and just leaned into this, because it impacts generations. It impacts quality of life. It impacts how you feel. And so I remember when I woke up to that, because I was not living my life. Oh, I'm an economic justice warrior, everybody. Oh, no, I was the financial sociopath in my family. Yes, I admit it. I was in charge in making sure that my parents and anyone that loved me made sure that they spent every nickel that they had to satisfy all of my wants. Care much about needs? That's a given. Made sure I had all my wants. Made sure that we enjoyed shopping trips, and every year had a new wardrobe, and there's never a no. And, maybe they would interject the idea of saving. It was just an idea. That sounds like a good idea. But because we were enjoying the mall, who has time to actually go for it and save? Okay? That's just all right. And And so when I think about my recent ancestors, when I say recent, I think about my grandparents and then their siblings. They all own their own homes. They all paid their bills on time. On my father's side, my grandfather, he was a over the road truck driver. On my mother's side, the women were domestics on Miami Beach their entire life. But somehow they understood the power of money. They own their own homes. When they passed away, they did so debt free. They
Mm.
prepaid their funerals. They prepaid their funerals.
Well,
They
that's
would
something you don't
leave
hear
a
about a lot.
vacation short, early rather, to go
Mhm.
home because you couldn't pay electronically to make sure that their bills were paid on time. Unfortunately, because we're busy satisfying Sabrina's wants, didn't have time to really hold me accountable. And then when I think about my parents, my father, he was a decorated military. His attitude towards money was the dictator, meaning this is grown folks' business. You see your way out of it. Don't it's not anything for you to even think about. Just make sure the lights are on. And my mother still thinks she's the Queen of England. And so that conflict between them, I was able to manipulate to make sure all my needs, my wants were satisfied. And so then when I graduated from Lincoln University, HBCU in Pennsylvania, woo woo, went out into the world, still expecting my father, when I called him a dictator regarding being controlling about the information on money. He had no idea what the world was waiting for me, had no idea. And so when the student loan people have the audacity to want their money back,
Want their money back. They sure did. As soon as you graduated, didn't they?
you really meant that document that I signed without reading it.
Mhm.
You are going to hold me accountable for doing so? And my father he was there and then he, passed away, unfortunately. But there was no one riding in on a white horse. And that's who I was expecting to come in because he was there before. And so it wasn't until I was going through my adult life, I became a performer, stand-up comic, actor, radio, and a friend invited me to a financial education conference. And it was there that I had that aha moment. And I'll never forget it. I know where I was sitting, was in uh, a, a convention center in New Jersey. And the whisper said, what if children, typically those who look like you, could learn what you're learning this weekend? And then the second question, the second whisper said, what if you had had this information as a child? Be totally different. I mean, if we could all start over again and start saving, oh my gosh, multimillionaire. And so I started to research what was available, who's teaching children financial education. And to this day, World of Money is the leading provider of immersive financial education for children ages 7 to 18. And actually, I'll take that up to 21 because now we're their
Mm.
official financial education provider for Lincoln University. And so what I did in terms of creating it after when I had that aha moment, World of Money was launched 6 months later, creating the word, trademarking the name and everything, and pouring in to children what I didn't, no one taught me, parents say no one taught me either. And we have an immersive approach because financial education is like a foreign language. And so a workshop on budgeting is not the same as financial education. You can learn cell research or something in biology, but there's a whole system around that particular subject. And it starts for us with
Right.
how you think, financial history of the world, when it comes from an African experience, our participation in it. That's why we attract children from around the world and from other cultures as well.
Mhm.
And so it's immersive, not only in person, because we have our annual Youth Financial Education Institute here in New York City. Students are with us from 9 a.m. to 4:30 every day, and parents choose which week to send their children, ages 7 to 8. And then we have World of Money online. So we partner with schools who license our curriculum. What makes our curriculum unique is that the video lessons are led by students for their peers. So students see themselves in the content. And then we have
Mhm.
the World of Money app and then the World of Money online course who students or parents want their child to have a more self-guided experience. So all of that came from that aha moment and me not knowing and the wow of it. An hour before that, I had with no intentions of creating a nonprofit, with this particular focus, I was a volunteer with other organizations and other missions, but this has
Yeah.
changed the trajectory of my life, economic justice, not only for children, but their parents and families as well throughout the African diaspora.
Yeah. Thank you for that. You actually answered some other questions of how you came to this work. I actually didn't know that you used to be like a comedian and acting. So that's so interesting. I think when people think about finance, we think it's a very serious topic, right? So you would think there's usually a certain personality type that gets into finance, financial literacy, but so that's
No, it's
awesome. So like when you
important.
had that,
And to your point, it is
yes.
serious, but there's a hard energy around it. And so
Mhm.
our
Yeah.
approach is fun. Financial education brings you joy. So we're standing on the desk, teaching credit, and you have to bring it to life. And when it
Yes.
comes to your own economic liberation, that is fun. That is joy, that you have options and access in your life. And so that's why it's
Yeah.
important in terms of our teaching approach that we deliver it with an interactiveness as well as Socratic inquiry and joy. So important. Number one, to keep everybody awake. That's our
Yeah.
approach. And that's what I learned
Absolutely.
from
And I wanted
performing. You have to keep audiences awake. So I
changed.
learned.
Yep. That is awesome. And as before we kind of dig a little bit more into World of Money specifically and Kiza, I wanted to ask you, going back to that story, the aha moment. We love a good Oprah aha moment, right? So going back to that moment, you were at this conference. And so you had the idea, but how did you then take that idea and put it into action? I think we all tend to have a lot of ideas and things, but most of us, we don't actually put into action the idea. So that's my first question. How'd you go from aha moment to actually putting forth and working through this idea and creating this nonprofit?
It was literally from nothing. It was Googling, how do you create a nonprofit organization? I don't know why I chose nonprofit as opposed to for profit, but obviously we're here
I was
now,
going to ask.
19 years later.
Yeah.
And then I started to ask, follow up the research. What were the legal requirements for a board? And that's how it happened, literally out of nothing. And I just let my fingers do the walking. Everything that you need, no matter, who's listening to this and you have an idea for something, the answer is at the end of your fingertips and literally created. And remember that movie, the old adage, if you build it, they will come. Well,
Yep.
sometimes that's true. But in this case, that's what occurred. And I was also on the radio station that was called Kiss FM at that time. And I started to
Mhm.
put the pieces together, think about the duration, how, because it didn't start off with 120 classroom hours. It started off with 20 and 35. And then the younger children wanted to come and parents started to tell each other about World of Money and started to build from there. And so when you start putting the bricks in order, you'll find that the universe tends to support you, but you have to take,
Mhm.
steps forward first.
Absolutely. You have to be willing to take a little leap of faith.
Yes.
And then, but certainly, I will agree with you. It's been my experience that when there is alignment, all you need to do is take the first step and the other things they will come. Doesn't mean it'll be easy, but they will definitely fall into place. And so, great. The second part of my question was going to be obviously what came out of the aha moment was starting the nonprofit. But then for you personally, when you think about your personal finances, what was that aha moment for you and how, or was it transformational for you in terms of how you started to approach your own personal financial management?
I have to constantly review my own relationship with money. For example, if I'm
Mhm.
reaching for chocolate, there's something else going on, and it's usually emotional.
Mhm.
But I'm expressing how I'm feeling about a situation through my expenditures. I would say more than 50% of our expenditures and how we leverage money or manage money is because of our own emotions or our own perceptions of our own self worth. That's why some people walk around with somebody else's name on their body and they think that they're more because they have that logo, which is just a t shirt, just got a new logo on it. That's all that it is. But it feeds the emptiness in their spirit, in their soul. And so what we do at World of Money and through everyone that I speak with, first start off with understanding that you're perfect as you are. I have a great
Yeah.
week if I can go through the week without spending any money or spending very little. Maybe it's on food or something like that. But it got to the point where I don't like shopping really, unless I really need that, because my game plan for my life is to make sure that I have options and access, that I have a nest egg, that anything that I'm spending money on is really an asset that's increasing in value over time as opposed to depreciation. I have a closet full of depreciating items right now that have zero value.
Yeah.
And as soon as we
Yeah.
recognize what value is, what we spend money on is what we value. And so I had to
Yeah.
change Sabrina's own value system from, remember the shopping malls that I was going to as a child, a
Mhm.
teenager, or a young adult, to feed the emptiness, my worthiness. You don't have to spend in, here's the example. You're going to see this sweater again. You're going to see it again because I don't need another one
Absolutely.
unless this falls off my body. So that's how I had to
Mhm.
do and continue to do, because sometimes I will need that chocolate. But then I go back to, what is that issue that I need that chocolate? Do I need to really focus more on solving it or putting something in my body that really doesn't nourish it? Those are the questions I have to
Mhm.
always ask myself.
Yeah, and if I can ask a follow-up to that, because I think this conversation is so necessary because I don't think people, to your point, often look at their relationship with money and think about the drivers of what they spend money on. To your point, what you spend money on speaks to what you value. And so, how did you make that connection? Like, how did you realize, okay, I'm spending money, and a lot of times it's maybe more emotionally charged than me actually needing this thing? Like, how were you able to make that connection to understand that you needed to change your relationship with money?
So I had to really look at my bank account to review everything that I've spent money
Yeah.
on that I'm receiving zero return on investment. Maybe I feel good in that moment, and I really want to
Mhm.
live a financially secure life. That's what I really want. And it's an inside job. It really is an inside job. No one's going to come down and tell you or save you or anything. And yes, there are external issues, particularly as it relates to the Black community globally. Absolutely. But there are other things that we can do as well. We have $1.5 trillion spending power. If we were to reshape that spending power, look at it a different way, reinvest in ourselves and all these other statistics that it relates to home ownership and access to capital that we're appealing to the outside world. I would love to
Mhm.
see a time where we redirect all that spending power either into other Black owned businesses and into ourselves and our families and our communities. We could do all of that. While there's other external issues, sure. But about the 1.5 trillion spending power that's leaving our community, not benefiting many Black owned businesses, some, but what if it was going to your business, for example, that you had a financial statement because you gain, let's say, 200 new customers from listening to this conversation. And then you could hire other people, hire young people. You can do more.
Yeah.
There's so much we
Mhm.
can do, but it all goes back to our value system. And I'm not sitting
Yeah.
here pointing my finger at anybody else. It starts with me.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because certainly there is a clear behavioral part of financial man. Like, so take a step back. We can educate people all day long, but if the behavioral, emotional, the overall relationship with money and the way we utilize money doesn't change. It's almost like food, right? Like our relationship with food until we change or create the healthiest relationship that we can have with money, the education and the information will be just that, just information that sit there and doesn't get applied. And so I'm curious, going back to World of Money and Wikis and the work that you do, how do you try to address, maybe specifically with some of the older students that you work with? I know starting younger is helpful because you're in that stage of creating some of those behaviors and helping them to understand how they should be thinking about money and the relationship they should have. But with the older students or even the college students? How do you help them unpack and understand their relationship with money to then help them be able to truly absorb all of the education and information that you're providing to them?
Sure. Before any traditional financial subject, I believe, should be taught, first you have to unpack the financial personality that you're talking to. If there are 20 people
Mhm,
sitting here right now, there's 20 different personalities that you have to talk to, right? It's not
mhm,
one size fits
mhm,
all. There's the victim
absolutely.
financial archetype. There's the Disneyland financial archetype. There's the saboteur. There's the martyr. There's the savvy one. And so you have to speak to each one. So, for example, the martyr financial archetype, and I've explained this at great length in my book, Do I Look Like an ATM? A Parent's Guide to Raising Financially Responsible African American Children. And actually, anyone can read it because it's not just for parents, now that I think about it.
Mhm,
But for example, the martyr mostly shows up in single mothers. They believe if
mm,
they sacrifice themselves for their children, that shows how much they love them and that they themselves don't need any financial security at all because they need to pour and risk their financial safety for this child who does not care how mama or daddy is going to live on retirement or a retirement that they have not saved for because they were spending all their money on all these wants and trinkets and so forth with the child. Okay. And so speaking
yeah,
to that martyr parent, what I say to them now, what I outlined in my book is that I encourage you to understand how your
mhm,
martyr financial archetype impacts that boy or girl child. They grow up thinking that number one, it mostly shows up in women, that women do not have the audacity or the right to require financial security for themselves. And women must sacrifice themselves.
mhm,
Okay.
mhm,
And so the boy and the girl child's watching mama martyr or daddy martyr and saying, this is how women and men are supposed to be, or the
yeah,
Disneyland parent. Everything is just wonderful. And the child sitting there saying, the
mhm,
lights were cut off last night. I don't know what she's talking about. She is not answering, or he's not answering the phone calls when the collection people come. We had to move 3 times
right,
because the rent's not being paid. And they're going to Baltimore every weekend to go to the clam bake. All right. What the child understands from that Disneyland parent is that it's okay to lie about your reality. It's okay to lie as long as you're having fun. It's
mm,
Disneyland, right? And it also shows up with parents who are separated or divorced. Sometimes the Disneyland parent wants to outshine the other parent to prove that they're worthy as people or worthy as parents. So when my son or daughter comes to stay with me next weekend, I'm going to take them all around and we're going to have a great time to show life is better with me over your other parent. And that Disneyland parent may not take financial, or maybe they're not taking the best financial behaviors for themselves. So they all show
yeah,
up. And so it's not one size fits all. It depends on who you're talking to. And I also like to talk about
mhm,
the victim personality as well. That has
mhm,
power because we call them victim. They're like, look, that check comes every the 15th of every month. I have a car outside. I've been living in the subsidized housing for at least 3 generations. My grandmama and them lived here. What are you talking about that I need to change? And so the child witnesses this saying there's outside entities that are going to take care of all of our needs too.
mhm,
So we're going to stay right here. We don't have to do anything different, but our liberation comes from the outside in, not
yeah,
leveraging our own innate power. So all of those personalities have to be addressed, and then we can address them. And then those personalities can say, I don't want to influence my child in this way because I really want better for myself. But first, we got to understand there's different people, there's different financial personalities that we have to talk to in a certain way and understand their impact on their families and their impact on their children. I should, because that one more is popping up. Hey, me too,
okay,
me too.
yeah,
The saboteur personality, they have power
mm,
too. Because why? They're
Hmm.
going to be rescued by somebody, the daddy, the mama, grandmama, and them. And we don't have to pay any attention to make sure that our family's financial life is in order because somebody else is going to take care of it. We don't need estate plan and everything. We don't need it because the probate court is going to take care of that. And then we can argue at the repass about who's going to get pearl. Got to understand there's different personalities and they all feel powerful depending on their own
Hmm.
perspective with regard to money.
Wow. I mean, that book sounds amazing. We'll definitely make sure we include all the information for our listeners, but it's important. I think to your point, it sounds like you're already addressing it, which is you can work with the kids all day long. It's also important that there is some work done with the parents too, because there's implicit and there's explicit instruction, and they are still paying attention to what they're observing, right? And what they're seeing. And so being able to work with some of the parents and make sure that there's at least some alignment or at least some awareness, right, around what they're demonstrating for their students is super, super important. Well, that's all for today, folks. Enjoyed the show? Be sure to like and rate the podcast. You can find the Race, Wealth, and Health podcast on multiple platforms, including Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. I also want to hear from you, so don't forget to connect with me on social media. You can follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook at Race Wealth Health. By joining the online community, you'll stay updated on the latest episodes, behind the scenes insights, and engaging discussions. Share your thoughts, comments, and questions there. I appreciate your support in sharing the podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues who may also find value in these conversations. Thank you again for joining me on this journey. Until next time, take care, stay informed, and keep up the good fight for equality.